And we are live.
Good, good.
Welcome to Battle Tested History number 8. That
Can't
many.
believe we can't believe we've already done that many.
I know. It seems like only yesterday.
Yeah.
but
Seems like only 16 weeks ago we started this.
who knew? Anyway, today we're going to be discussing just how sneaky those British bastards were
Yeah.
during the Second World War. Specifically, everybody's heard of MI6,
Hmm.
um, MI5. They had the what was it? SOE,
The SOE, Special Operations Executive. Yeah.
yeah, horrible name, great unit.
Yeah.
Um, they were doing all sorts of sneaky skullduggery,
Yeah.
both against the Germans and against us, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Um, and the movie that we've chosen to go with for this is called Operation Mincemeat, which was an actual operation.
Hmm.
And I'll let Scott tell us about it.
All right. For the history buffs out there, you know a lot what I'm talking about. Operation Mincemeat was a British plan to throw off the Germans about where our first invasion was going to be after North Africa. Everybody thought it was going to be Sicily. It made sense. It was the biggest island. You landed Sicily, Rome's right across the way. The Germans knew it. Everybody knew it. So the British came out with this idea. It was two operation executives. It was a guy named Chumley who came up with this idea, and it was Ewan Montague, both of them from Room 12, which was one of the really super secret parts of the SOE. They put it together that they were going to take a body, a somebody who would not be missed. And for those of you big history buffs, this was The Man Who Never Was, the movie that came out in the 1950s, and the book written by Ewan Montague. I'll explain that in a minute. But the whole idea was to take this body, dress him up as a British officer, and handcuff to him a briefcase with papers in it. Some classified documents, but mostly documents from Eisenhower to generals in the theater,
Mm-hmm.
indicating that the real invasion was going to take place in the Dardanelles in Greece, going for the Balkans, and that Sicily and maybe Sardinia were going to be distractions.
Just feints.
Just feints. Yeah, that we were going to land there, but that wasn't where the real invasion was. And the movie goes through the whole thing about how they come up with the plan, how they find the body, uh, they prepare it, the troubles they have with getting the upper high command to agree with it, and it even goes into how the Germans fell for this. Now, I watched the movie. It's new on Netflix. It's only a couple of months old. Colin Firth is in it. He plays Montague. Excellent performance. But when I saw the movie, I thought to myself, oh, come on, this is bizarre. They F this up for Hollywood. They dramatized this whole thing. So I bought and I just finished reading the book by, I think, Robert McIntyre, Operation Mincemeat.
Mm-hmm.
This was under dramatized. I mean,
Yeah.
everything that happened in the movie, in the movie, happened in the book. They
Mm-hmm.
didn't they didn't change anything. The Man Who Never Was in 1953 was released because people were starting to find out about it. So Ewan Montague went to MI6 and said, "Look, they're going to find out about it. Let me write the story." But when they wrote the story, they left out a lot of information. It was just the basic bare facts.
Mm-hmm.
This movie pretty much tells you everything that actually happened. The screw ups that they had, where The whole idea was to land the body off the coast of Spain and make them think that it was in a plane crash. The Spanish government was in cahoots with the Germans, and they figured, they dropped it right near a fishing village where one of the most ambitious German espionage networks worked. They figured it would go up the chain of command, and the body was taken when it was found to the Spanish Navy, which was the only group in Spain that was pro-British.
Yep.
And the movie goes into the fun details about how they have to try to, without making it sound like they want people to read this, how they went through the whole process of getting it to the Germans. One thing the movie didn't do, which I found fascinating, when it went to Berlin, it landed on the desk of a man named Ernst Rona. He was a capitalist. He was severely anti-communist, which is why he joined the Nazi Party. He was head of the German military intelligence field division, and he was also anti-Nazi. He joined the party because of the anti-communism, but when he saw what was going on in the camps and the invasions, he had turned his mind. And other people were saying, this is too good. Come on, we're being dropped with this. We know it's going to go to Sicily. And he happened to have Adolf Hitler's ear. And he saw it, he looked at it, and he said, they're landing in Sicily. So he went, got an audience, placed it down in front of Hitler and said, yep, they're going to invade in Greece. And he knew that Hitler was just obsessed with the Balkans because that's where he got so much. Romania gave us half of the oil. There was a couple of other commodities coming out of the region that only came from there. Hitler wound up moving major divisions. He moved the Panzer Division out of Sicily, put it down in the Dardanelles, moved some over to Sardinia, and when we landed on the shore, it was a complete success. The Germans weren't expecting us. Our troops, who were pretty much young recruits, some of them had not seen combat, stormed the shore, and within, I think it was like 6 to 8 weeks, Sicily fell. It was our first incursion into Europe, and it was a success. It gave us that foothold that we needed.
Yep.
The Operation Mincemeat, the movie on Netflix, and if you want to read a lot of the details, the movie's extraordinarily accurate. But pick up the book by McIntyre, Macintyre. Operation Mincemeat. It's on Amazon.
Yep. There are also a number of really good documentaries.
Yes.
They go through all of it. From they put out word to the steno pool for a picture of this fake guy's girlfriend.
Yeah.
And that woman was still alive at the time of the documentary.
Yeah.
It interviewed her. She was all giddy about it.
Yeah.
And of course,
and
they had to keep quiet for decades.
And then they go into this in the movie, even though he was married and not having an affair, he was having a flirtatious friendship with a young woman in his office, and they wrote the letters back and forth to each other.
Right.
And the book goes.
And the funny thing that the documentary pointed out, the woman who was writing those love letters, was a spinster.
Yeah.
Look at Mrs. Gulch.
Yeah.
From The Wizard of Oz.
Oh yeah.
From The Wizard of Oz. That was what this woman was like.
Yeah. And it goes into the details about how, like, they put an eyelash, they folded the paper once, because if you fold it once, if you start folding it again, it'll be noticed. They folded the page once and they put eyelashes in each of the letters. So even if the Germans, which they did, were able to extract the letters without breaking the seal on the envelope or the official government seal. When they got them back and opened the letters carefully, there were no eyelashes, so they knew the Germans had read it. Yeah. Very brilliant operation. The movie and the book go into the difficulty of creating a covert operation that is not bad enough that everybody's going to look at it and go, oh, this is a crock of shit, but still good enough to convince them that, oh my God, we got our hands on this. This is the real thing. So.
And the bizarre thing is, they took months. The body had been in the freezer for a couple of months by the time they released it.
Mm-hmm.
By the time they dropped it in the water.
Yeah. The original Man Who Never Was never gave away the name of it. It was what inspired the book, which inspired the movie, was documents were released around 2009, which it was inadvertently the guy's name came out. Gwindor, I can't remember, Gwindor something, that was playing Willie Martin. And he was a guy, nobody knew anything about him. He committed suicide with, I think, arsenic. And they got the body, and they requested the family, can we use the body for a secret operation? And the family really didn't care about him, and they said, yeah. And his name had been covered up for years. And that's one of the great things in the movie and the book. They make this no-name guy who just passed away. They give him a name, they reveal his name, and they make him the hero that he is.
Yeah, it's a guy who committed suicide because he felt worthless.
Yeah.
Ended up playing a pivotal role in the Second World War.
Thousands of German, British, American, I think Canadian lives. Yeah.
Yep. But, and here's the thing, that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yes.
For what the British Secret Service was doing.
Yes. If you guys want to, if you're a history major or an intelligence major, this is the book. Bodyguard of Lives. I read this when I joined the CIA. It is fascinating. It talks about everything the British did. How they completely duped the Germans about the Normandy invasion. The ultra secret, how they broke the German code, how they knew what the Germans were going to do often before the German field commanders knew.
Yes.
And they also point out in the book that the one time that Hitler got suspicious and didn't use the codes.
Battle of the Bulge.
Battle of the Bulge, where we got caught with our pants down. Yep. So it's a brilliant book.
He went to complete radio silence.
Yep. All messages were hand carried to the front. And when they went through the Ardennes, we were not a clue. No one knew it was coming.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so there are arguments that some did.
Yeah.
That there was French and Belgian citizens who were providing intelligence that was ignored, but whatever. Yeah. Whatever. And I posted in Asylum of Fear a bit of salacious business about what the Brits did when it came to us.
Yes.
The best. I mean, they did a bunch of stuff. There's their own propaganda out there. They created a map of Central America that showed it split into different groups.
Mm-hmm.
How that was supposedly the Nazi plan to take over Central America. Complete bullshit. But Roosevelt fell for it.
Yeah.
And Roosevelt made this great speech about how the Germans were doing this. That he had this map in his hand.
Yeah.
And it was bullshit. But the best one I found happened around the Lend-Lease program.
Hmm.
A guy by the name of Vanderbilt, who was isolationist, staunchly isolationist. So the Brits, who had an office, like, this is no, I'm not making this up. The Brits had an office in 30 Rock, in Rockefeller Center,
Yeah.
that was run by this Canadian industrialist something. I forget his name, but this Vanderbilt guy was uh, really against Lend Lease, and they needed his vote. So the Brits sent this woman named Cynthia,
Hmm.
and Cynthia must have had something awfully sweet in her nethers, boy, because she engaged in a bit of horizontal espionage. And before you knew it, he went from being an isolationist to an internationalist.
Yeah.
And he voted for Lend Lease, which gave the Brits enough supplies from us and war materials from us to keep them going while we were,
Yeah.
figuring out what to do.
One of my favorite war stories is right before the Battle of El Alamein. Rommel had his foot. Now, geographically, El Alamein is, I think, about 100 miles west of Alexandria. And south of there's a few mile stretch of land. And then south of it is the Qattara Depression. This huge, deep, sunken part of the desert. It's passable, but very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And Rommel didn't think we were ever going to do it. So he put all of his troops right there in front of El Alamein, and that's where the operation was intended. So they needed a way to figure this out. In comes this chubby, overweight, not too bright British intelligence officer who was working in the cyber office.
Mm-hmm.
And he would get the cybers, and the way it worked is that they would be translated at one location in Alexandria, and then he would take them to their various offices. The Germans knew about this, so the Germans used a honey trap. There was this exotic dancer from one of the nightclubs he attended who fell in love with him, and she convinced him that on his way from cyber security to military headquarters, he stopped by for a Nuna. Just long enough so the Abwehr officer could sneak in, open the briefcase, copy everything. So the Brits found out about this, that a lot of good classified information was being released. So they gave him an option. One, prosecution. They'll throw the book at him. They will make it public. BBC, The Times, everywhere. His stupidity and how it led to treason would become a national issue and embarrass him, his family, his friends.
Mm-hmm.
Or he was given a briefcase and he was told to drive, go south. There's a minefield right near the Qattara Depression. Drive into it until you hit a mine, which he did. The Germans came out to see what was happening. They found the Jeep. They found the dead body. They took the documents back. The documents told how that the British troops up at El Alamein were a feint, that Montgomery was going to go through the Qattara Depression. Rommel moved most of his forces down there, and when the battle took place, Montgomery went right through El Alamein and wound up almost cutting off the entire Africa Corps. And from the Battle of El Alamein, it was a continuous German retreat. They
Pretty
never
much.
they never had an actual victory against the British. They beat our ass at Kasserine Pass, but it was a complete total fallback until the Germans eventually left North Africa. I think it's like absolutely brilliant that they are willing to pull this stuff.
Oh, and they were they had essentially three operations going at once.
Yeah.
One was the commando operation,
Mm-hmm.
where they would go and meet with various um, partisans in the resistance movement
Hmm.
and helped them blow up bridges and railroad yards and various things. Um, and then you had um, you had a the intelligence operation Bletchley Park,
Yeah.
where they were decoding the Enigma intercepts,
Yes.
which is brilliant. Another great movie starring everybody's favorite Cumberbatch
Yes. I know which movie you're talking about. I was going to mention that. Yeah.
that talks about how they broke that code.
Yeah.
Very interesting, very good movie. And they also had a third unit that was doing nothing but camouflage.
Yeah.
And they were um, finding interesting ways. They were artists. A lot of these guys, artists and architects, who were changing the shape of buildings, planting shrubs
Yeah.
and stuff on rooftops
Yeah.
to make them appear as anything other than what they were.
Right.
Um, I forget who was it, the Brits or the Americans who made the inflatable army.
I think it was the Americans.
I forget. Yeah, it was one or the other. I think Hollywood got involved, and
Yeah.
yeah, and they started. They created a whole fictitious army
Yeah.
under Patton.
Yeah. Yeah. Because the whole Normandy invasion was, you know, Hitler was convinced it was going to be Normandy.
Mhm.
Rommel was convinced it was going to be Normandy. That's where they were setting up some of their worst defenses. And they wanted to try to convince him it was part of Calais. So they took Patton after Sicily, they threw him in northern England, and they gave him this fictitious army, which was made of nothing but like a whole bunch of people sending out stupid communications, a couple guys that would go out to the pubs locally, and all of this rubber inflated army. So when German aircraft came over, they'd see it. And even after the Normandy invasion, because Patton was still there, they wouldn't believe it. By the time they realized Normandy was the real thing, they
Mhm.
couldn't get there because what was brilliant was they didn't bomb Normandy. They bombed
Yep.
everything. They bombed everything north of Normandy from the Pas de Calais inward.
Mhm.
And that way, when the invasion took place, they couldn't get this. They couldn't get reinforcements there because
Mhm.
everything had been destroyed in the region. There's a funny story. When I was in college, the JFK library used to put together these symposiums, and one of my college professors would take me, and one of them was about Eisenhower, and the guy told the story, which I know, Jeff, you'll love this. Eisenhower was making a trip of these fake camps up north,
Mhm.
and he pulls into one of them, and there's no one on guard duty. The gates open. Any German on a bicycle could have gone in, seen that the whole thing was a farce, reported it back to headquarters. It was
And
over. So Eisenhower picks up the phone, and it rings and it rings, and finally this guy comes on the phone and is like, "Yeah, what do you want?" And he goes, "I'm at the front gate. There's no one here. What type of security are you running?" And the guy goes like, "Well, what do you care?" And Eisenhower's like, "I am Dwight David Eisenhower. I'm commander of SHAEF. That's why I care." And the guy on the other end goes, "Do you know who I am?" Ike goes ballistic, starts yelling and screaming and swearing, and goes, "No, I don't know who you are." And the guy on the other end goes, "Oh, thank God," and hung up. So,
yeah, yeah. The only difference between what you said and what I understood was that the Germans always thought it was Pas de Calais.
yeah,
They never really considered Normandy as a. I mean, they
yeah,
Rommel being Rommel prepped the Normandy coast in the event, but the
yeah,
Germans all said Pas de Calais
yeah,
because it was the closest point to England.
yeah, yeah.
Um, what the Secret Services did was encourage them to keep thinking that.
Yeah.
And they were, I mean, whatever it was at work, because they were completely flummoxed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, other thing, there is, you were talking about how Hollywood was
Mhm.
involved in this, and we were talking about the floatable army. There is a book out there. It's an older book, The War Magician by David Fisher.
Mhm.
Um, the book, it's an older book. David Fisher, it's sort of an autobiography. He was a magician that was hired by the Brits. He was, because he was the only one, like, they asked him to do camouflage. So he was
Mhm.
doing camouflage. He used mirrors to
Mhm.
reflect the leaves. So when the British generals showed up, he found like every bunker built by every other group, but couldn't find fishes. So that's why they hired him. He wound up hiding the Suez Canal, moved Alexandria. He did all of these great things, and the book goes into the details about how they did this and how, they just used, he used intelligence like he used magic.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's a trick here, but I can't figure it out. But man, he made that card disappear. So
Yeah. Well,
I'm
a
really
lot of
hoping.
it was misdirection.
Yes.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
Oh, look what I'm doing over here. Boom.
Um, Tom Cruise, whose Valkyrie, I think is one of the most brilliant war movies ever made. I loved Valkyrie. Tom Cruise bought the rights to The War Magician. I'm just hoping someday he goes through and makes it into a movie. If he makes the movie as good and as accurate as he made Valkyrie, it's going to be brilliant.
Hopefully, they do it without Tom Cruise, though.
But yeah, no, I mean, I was always amazed. Like the British broke Ultra, and The Imitation Game. That's the movie with
That's it.
Cumberbatch.
That's it.
They go into the details of how they figured out, because it was a 24-hour time period. The Germans changed the code every 24 hours.
Mhm.
So they had to break the code within 24 hours. And there were so many dials and so many, I mean, the computer system set up was so intricate, they couldn't do it in 24 hours.
Mhm.
Then they found, somebody realized, you have to figure out what all the words are, and they didn't know, they couldn't figure out the codes for any of the words until somebody came up with the brilliant idea. Well, what did the Germans end every cable with? Heil Hitler. They were able to break that. They were able to break the code for those two words. With those, the computers were able to break the code for all of them. They had Ultra. They knew exactly what was going on. You
And I
know,
believe the person who figured that out was a woman,
I think so. Yeah.
um, which it's, it's a sad fact of the times, but there were a lot of women intricately involved
Yeah.
in breaking these codes and in the stuff that was done at Bletchley Park, um, which I'll get to in a bit. But the women, because it was the 40s, they really didn't get the credit they should have
No,
gotten.
they didn't. It's only been the
So,
past like 10, 15 years that
mhm,
they're starting to get the credit.
yep, that was the creation of the first computer.
Yeah.
Women, largely it was women.
And I mean, all the women spies that were overseas, even for the
Yep,
OSS.
yep.
I mean, there was a very famous, they've got like a whole exhibit dedicated to her at the CIA library. Wish I could remember her name, but she was crippled. She had one leg, it was amputated. She still parachuted behind enemy lines, screwed things up for the Germans. The Gestapo had a price on her head, and she
Mhm,
refused to leave Germany, and she helped thwart everything for the Germans to help the Normandy invasion succeed.
mhm.
And that it wasn't until like the late 1990s before they started recognizing her, even at the CIA.
it was sad.
Yeah.
But Bletchley Park was this mansion that they had bought during the First World War.
Hmm.
And they filled it full of eggheads, essentially. Mathematicians, historians, college professors,
Mhm.
just all sorts of different uh, intellectuals. And their job was to go in and just figure shit out.
Yeah.
And they did
Yeah.
over and over again. I mean, the Brits could not have won World War II without us.
Right.
We probably could not have won World War II without the British Secret Service.
Right. Yeah. No,
There was
I don't think we would have made it. Or at the very least, we would at best, we wouldn't have even invaded Normandy before the Russians took over.
possibly not,
Yeah.
possibly not. That was another thing that the Brits did after the Japs bombed Pearl Harbor and
Yeah.
we entered the war. The British in America shifted their goal and went to convincing the powers that be in the U.S. to concentrate the primary effort on Europe
Yeah.
rather than Japan.
Yeah. Yeah, because all the Americans were like, we don't give a shit about the Germans. They declared war on us. We want to get back. I read in one book years ago that the deciding factor was FDR and Churchill were meeting in Washington. And the word had come in. This was, I think, June. I think this was June 42. The word had come in that Tobruk, which had been the bastion. And Tobruk had held out during the first German attack east. We pushed them back. The Germans took it. The Germans, when they went east the second time, surrounded it. Tobruk finally fell to the Germans. And that news was given to them during the meeting. And Churchill was so upset, and Roosevelt so bad for him, Roosevelt agreed to make Europe first.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure it was more complicated than that, but yeah.
Well, I mean, that's what I read.
Yeah, well, obviously it was more complicated than that because politics and
Yeah.
wheels within wheels. And
What always bothered me was, why did Hitler go after America?
he's insane.
It was his
He was
stupidest,
insane,
it
completely
was his
stupid.
stupidest move. If he didn't declare war on us, we never would have declared war on him. We would have gone after the Japanese. England would have been on its own.
We would have gotten there eventually,
Yeah.
but we wouldn't have put the amount of effort that we did.
No. No.
I mean, we were doing. That was the one place where the U.S. Secret Service shined.
Yes.
Is the Pacific War.
Yeah.
They managed to crack the Japanese codes
Yeah.
even before Pearl Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's how they were able to surprise the Japanese at Midway
Yes.
because they brought their codes and they knew where they were going. Uh, but for the most part, this was a British job.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were the ones who were supreme in the secret squirrel shit.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, it's difficult to armchair quarterback it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I know that Roosevelt was aware of the danger that Germany posed,
Yeah.
and leaving them unchecked would have been a bad idea.
Right.
We had to help Britain. If we hadn't sent a shitload of troops over there, eventually Hitler would have gotten around to invading.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been bad.
Yeah.
So, But I mean, you can't. Now, I'm down on the Brits, particularly Montgomery, because of because of Montgomery's not a big fan of Montgomery.
No.
Um, but in terms of intelligence, they were unparalleled
Yeah.
in the world.
Yeah.
There were things. I think they were the ones who informed Stalin that Hitler was planning to stab him in the back
Hmm.
after the non-aggression pact.
Right.
Stalin ignored them
Yeah.
because Stalin was another.
Yeah.
But
Well, Stalin thought the Brits were just trying to get him into the war to save their ass. And then
mhm,
next thing you know, Germans come across the border. He spends 3 days in his dock, are all drunk and not knowing what to do.
yeah, he granted the Russians bore the brunt of the casualties
Yes.
in that war. It was something like 7 million
Ah,
died.
mm,
It was some ridiculous number.
there's a lot. Yeah, I think there was maybe 7 million almost soldiers. People have put it at 25 million
Yeah, because of
German,
civilian casualties.
British, and civilian casualties after Barbarossa on the Eastern Front.
Mhm. Yeah, and that was a lot of that had to do with Stalin.
Yes.
Because Stalin would just throw his people in there,
Yeah.
poorly equipped. Some of
Mhm.
them didn't even have weapons,
Yeah.
and he
Pick
would
up the
throw
weapon
them
from
in,
the guy that dies in front of you.
and they would throw them out there in front of the Germans.
Yeah.
So naturally, a lot of Russians got killed.
Yeah.
Also, much is made of the fact that Eisenhower chose not to go to Berlin.
Right.
I think he was right to do so. The
Yeah.
Russian casualties getting to Berlin were appalling.
Yeah.
And it would have been the same for us, just as it would have been had we gone to Tokyo.
Oh God, that would have been a nightmare.
That
But the
would.
thing about the Germans, though, they opened up the Western Front. They wanted us to take Berlin before the Soviets. Eisenhower was like, "What's in Berlin? It's a symbol."
That's
He was convinced that the Nazi regime, probably Hitler, and everything was in the National Redoubt down in Bavaria.
Well, even regardless of that,
Yeah.
even forgetting Hitler for the moment,
Yeah.
um, a lot of the generals and politicians at the time in World War II were making the same mistake that the Union generals largely did
Yeah.
in the Civil War, because everybody was on to Richmond,
Yeah.
until Grant came along and said, I don't care about Richmond. I'm
Mm.
going after Lee.
Yeah.
That's the way you win a war. You destroy the
Exactly.
enemy. The cities are nothing. You destroy their army.
Mm.
And that's what Eisenhower chose to do. And he was right to do it.
He was right. Yeah. And it's funny because the Soviets survived probably because of espionage.
Yeah.
Their spy, Richard Sorga, in Japan, Stalin was terrified of moving all of his troops out of the east because he was afraid the triumvirate pact with Germany, Italy, and Japan, that Japan was going to invade, was going to adhere to the treaty, and was going to invade from the east shortly after Hitler did.
Japan
And
had already defeated them once.
yeah,
Yeah, Japan
yeah,
beat
they
them.
did 1905, I think.
something like that.
Yeah, and Stalin didn't want to do that. And this guy, Richard Sorga, very fascinating story if you read about him. He proved that the Japanese weren't stupid. They're fighting America. They ain't going to fight the Russians. He sent it to Stalin. Stalin felt well. He took on all of his forces off the eastern front. I mean, off the east coast, off of Siberia, shipped them in. And a lot of historians think that's what stopped that influx of troops at the last minute. Is what stopped Hitler from taking Moscow. That the fact that Hitler kept on diverting the charge every few months, but
Yeah, yeah. He decided to go after Stalingrad,
yeah, there
which
was
was
he went after Leningrad and delayed the drive them on. There was another, I think it might have been Kiev.
yeah, it had something to do with the oil fields.
Yeah,
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 something to do with the oil fields.
but it was just he made a
Mhm.
lot of stupid mistakes later. Thank
Mhm.
God.
Well, just invading Russia in the first place
Yeah,
was a bad decision because
yeah,
yes, France was beaten.
yeah.
We can talk about the French later if you'd like, but
But
um,
I don't think anybody's ever taken Russia.
no,
No, at least not in
no,
like the last 500 years.
no. Jennifer is mentioned.
But the whole espionage aspect of World War II just absolutely fascinating. The stuff they pulled. The there was one. There's a book out there from the German perspective. It's called Nazi Interrogator, and it's a book about the Luftwaffe's the Luftwaffe intelligence officer that got the most information from American pilots. Never tortured them. He
Mm.
had this brilliant method because he knew all the Americans and the Brits. He was mostly responsible for the Americans, were terrified. So whenever they were captured, he would tell the troops, rough them up a little bit, throw them into a jail cell, isolated, cold, no toilet, don't feed them or talk to them for 24 hours. Then the Germans would come down, bring him up, and then he'd show up and start yelling at his soldiers. What are you doing? My God, give this man something to eat. And then he'd start, I'm so sorry. I just found out you were here. And he knew a lot of details he had picked up. Like, one person might have said, oh, I'm with the 903rd Bomb Group. And there was a crack on the wall behind where the photos were
Mhm.
taken. So he knew, if there's a crack in the ID, you're the 903rd, and somebody else let it slip that, like, Bob Simmons was the commanding officer. So he'd sit down, they'd come in, they'd give him the food, and he goes, so is Bob Simmons still the commanding officer of the 903rd? And these poor guys are like, oh, shit, he knows everything.
Mhm.
The story that I love about this is he was walking with an American fighter pilot, and they were talking about prowess. And the German said, "Well, we're better pilots than you are. We don't use traces." And the American, without thinking, said, "Oh, we don't use them to fix our target. We use traces. They're the last rounds. When we see the traces, we know we're out of ammunition." He sent it to the Air Ministry. Hermann Goering, for all of his faults, read it and sent a report out to every air unit. If you see the American fighters shooting traces, they're out of ammunition. Don't engage them. And American pilots were reporting all of a sudden, you're like, the Germans would come in, they'd shoot traces, and the Germans would just turn away and fly off. So
Mhm.
it can be used for good.
Can be used for good. Can be
Or
used for evil.
evil. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Um, they used they kind of gave a nod to Operation Mincemeat
Yeah.
in one of my favorite war movies, Where Eagles Dare.
Mm, love that movie. Yes.
Awesome movie.
Favorite espionage movie.
Total fiction, great movie.
total fiction, but it's one of those movies. The first time I watched it, I'm like, wow, I didn't see that coming. And then 5 minutes later, wow, I didn't see that coming. And then, like, by the last 10 minutes of the movie, I'm like, well, who the hell is on whose side?
Yep.
But it's a brilliant movie. That
Yep.
and the other one I love is The Eagle Has Landed.
Eagles Landed, that's another good one.
Yeah.
Well, and of course there's The Dirty Dozen.
Oh, yes.
Also complete fiction.
Yeah.
Great movie.
Yeah.
You want it to have been true.
Yeah. Well, there was a hint of truth in The Eagle Has Landed. The Germans had set up a mission to assassinate Churchill, but I don't think they even got as far as they did in the movie.
No.
So.
No. I wish they'd make a movie out of Otto Skorzeny.
Oh my God! Yeah, he was.
That guy was such a badass.
Yeah.
Yeah, give credit where credit is due. That guy.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, one of the most famous people who was involved with the British Secret Service during World War II was none other than Ian Fleming.
Yeah.
The creator of James Bond. For example, the head of MI6 is not called M. He's actually called C. But Ian Fleming had to change it. I mean, he was still, I'm sure, under the Official Secrets Act.
Yeah.
When he wrote the first James Bond book.
Yeah.
But interesting thing about him is that he was kind of an analyst. He wasn't really an agent per se.
Yeah.
But one of the agents that he handled was Aleister Crowley. I don't know exactly what Crowley did for the British Secret Service because he was an interesting cat to begin with, but he was a loon, let's face it. But just the fact that Ian Fleming, Aleister Crowley, how cool is that?
Were they using Aleister Crowley to gather information on Nazi occultism?
Well, I'm sure it had something to do with that.
Yeah.
Why else would they use him?
Yeah, because I mean, didn't he have like some pre-war contact with like the Vril Damen and
I'm sure.
Yeah.
And the Aberware.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
No, I'm trying to think of the Blazo or something, the head German occultist, which I should know. There's all the research I've done on it.
Me too.
But,
all my books on it.
But it is just such a fascinating history, how they got away with it, and then you get into the post-war part, where these same people who were fighting the Nazis in the last 6 months of the war were scooping them up and shipping them to the States and shipping them to Britain because these guys knew how to build ballistic missiles. They knew how to do guidance systems. There had been work, though it's still not certain how far they got on nuclear weapons. You know,
jet engines.
You know, I mean, all of this stuff. These guys were the whole Operation Paperclip. The people who are allowing them in were told if there's a paperclip on their documents, just don't even look at them, send them through. And the intelligence community gathered all this stuff and just, you know, we want him. You know, Werner von Braun, yeah, he used tens of thousands of Jewish slave laborers, a lot of whom died, but he knows how to build the rockets to bomb the Russians. So
yeah, and then there was your favorite Nazi war criminal and mine, Hans Kammler.
Yeah.
Who, yeah, that boy.
There is
that boy.
Oh, that's next on my reading list. There is, if you go on Amazon and look, Hans Kammler apparently has a series of autobiographies.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I looked into it. It's secretly written by him while he's under the employee of the CIA. And the guy who got them to publish them never said, I can't reveal my source for all these, and how we got out on that. I mean, it's all crockett. It's all bullshit. It's all fiction. But
Yeah. Well, assuming that he did make it to the United States
yeah,
as part of Operation Paperclip,
yeah,
the best thing I think about Kamala is that when he got to the United States, he vanished.
yeah,
Nothing more is known of it.
yeah,
I mean, there were um, believable claims that yeah, he was brought over because he was the one who was building all the underground bunkers. He
right.
was the one who was in charge of the V1 and V2 production.
Yeah, he had his finger in every scientific project.
Yep.
But I mean, it's not unheard of. Look at and I can't think of his name, the Japanese Ishii, the Japanese general who ran Unit 721 in Manchuria. It was a biological weapons plant, and they had no qualms. They would expose Chinese citizens, POWs, to malaria, Black Death, all sorts of diseases, and then they would autopsy them alive to see what was going, so they could develop the weapon better. And they had all of this information that would have taken us decades to do if we had done it properly. And he pretty much, when we were invading, he brought everything, stored everything away, brought a whole bunch of files, dropped them off to the Americans, and said, if you're interested in those, I got a hell of a lot more, let me go. And the Americans said, bring us the box. And when all the information was there, they said, bye, we don't ever want to hear from you again. I think he was like in his 70s when somebody discovered where he was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's easy. Kamala could have just been somewhere.
Oh, yeah. Easy. Easy. Because he wasn't he wasn't one of the recognizable ones.
No,
he wasn't Gary or Goebbels or any of those guys.
Yeah, he could blend in.
Yeah. So
that grumpy old German guy that lived down the street from you when you were in high school could have been.
Get us right on.
There was a guy when I was in junior high. We used to go to the local theater in my town, and I swear there was a guy that looked and dressed exactly like Adolf Hitler from the 1920s. He had the same hat, the same coat, the same hairstyle, the same mustache, all gray, and he'd sit by himself in the theater, eating popcorn. And my friends and I were always like, well, brilliant. Who's going to look for Adolf Hitler in Everett?
Well, yeah. You
and
gotta admit.
And he always used to root for the Japanese monsters during the the Godzilla movies. Maybe suspicious.
Imagine that.
But no,
anyway,
the espionage aspect of World War II is just you could spend years researching it and still find 1,000 other rabbit holes to go down.
Yep, that's one area that, beyond question, the Brits outshone us.
Yes.
By a mile.
Yeah.
There's no contest.
Yeah.
So, good job, you sneaky sons of bitches.
Yeah. And just to give the Brits, their due, not all the Brits like Montgomery. When I was in Iraq, I was stationed I was the liaison officer to the 8th Army, the Desert Rats, Montgomery's people from North Africa. And we were got on the talk one night about World War II. And I says, well, I'm not going to say anything because I know it's going to be Patton versus Montgomery. And they all laughed and said, Patton was the best general by far. Montgomery was an ass. We would have won the war sooner without him.
Yes.
So, Yeah. So even a lot of the British military knew what a jerk he was.
That and the Rebel Devil program, I think, were Eisenhower's biggest mistakes.
Yeah.
Is the Rebel Devil program and allowing Market Garden,
Oh my God. Yeah.
giving the green light to Market Garden. I don't, what the hell could he have been thinking?
Well, that was the political part of him. Let Montgomery do something because Patton was grabbing all the headlines with his rush across, but even then, and that's another perfect example. The movie and the book shows how the intelligence showed this is, there's an SS armored division right in our path.
Yep.
And it didn't fit with the narrative. So everybody dismissed it.
Yeah. And there's a big thing, there's a big scene in that movie, which incidentally we should do.
All right.
Next time you want to do.
Sure, I love a bridge too far.
Excellent. But just to give you a little hint of it, there's a great scene in there where the communications guys are talking about how the crystals in the radio sets aren't really that good. And they're like, oh, I'm not going to say anything that this late in the game. No way.
Yeah.
And sure as shit, that was one of the biggest problems was those radio sets. But anyway, that brings us to the end of the hour.
It's a shame. I love this topic, but we could do this until Thursday.
I'm sure we'll do it again.
Yes. Remember, if you're really Bodyguard of Lives by Anthony K. Brown, best World War II history book I've read, and I've read so many of them about espionage.
I have not read that one, so I will have to.
Oh God, you'll love that one. Yeah.
Oh, dude, I've got a copy of Crusade in Europe, signed by Eisenhower.
Oh.
Now I'm sure it was done by one of those auto pens.
Maybe, but still,
it's got his signature in it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It is awesome. I got it on Amazon.
Just a quick question before we go, because we can have this debate later. Who was a better general, Eisenhower or MacArthur?
Oh, Eisenhower.
Oh, really? Oh, we're going to have a debate then. I think MacArthur was better.
MacArthur was too stuck on himself.
Yes, but that's what made him good. Well, we'll debate that at another time.
Yes, we will. I'm sure. So anyway, you got a book that just came out.
Yes, The Ghosts of the Maria Doria, third book in the Tatiana Paranormal series, available on Kindle Unlimited print. It's out. Pick it up. Jeff helped me so much on that book.
Great book. Great story. It rocks.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff helped me with all the maritime, trying to get it right. And coming out October 29th, the second book, Chronicles of Paul II, Errand of Mercy. This one, I have got probably, for the final scene, the most bizarre way to kill zombies that I can think of. Yes.
I like it.
And if you look at the front of the book, you'll get a hint at what I'm talking about.
Interesting, because I've seen that cover. It's a cool cover.
Christian Bentelin does my covers for the Nurse Alyssa and for the Chronicles of Paul series. I love his work. He is fantastic.
This one was done by D. Cooper, our very own DJ Cooper. This is Welcome to the City, the first book in the Epic Mayhem series. It is out. It's available in all formats except audio, which Matthew Crow has officially contracted to do the audio.
Excellent.
I'm really looking forward to him hearing how he does it. But the second book, Body Count, is due out on Halloween.
Oh, good.
The title is very apt. I just this morning resurrected Scott so I could kill him again. And believe me, dude, it's gratuitous.
I love it. No, I just finished the other day. I finished the McIntyre book, Operation Mincemeat. So I'm reading another history book, and I'm going to jump into yours tonight. I'm dying to see how you killed him.
Well, yeah, your first one is protracted.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it lasts a while, but I had originally used a different name
Mm-hmm.
for the guy, and then I decided, no, wait a minute, we got to use Scott for this.
Thank
So I went back and I changed some things around, and it kind of extended over a long time. You do get to have a meat cleaver in your forehead, though.
you. Ooh. See, everybody who's watching us who's not a horror fan, who's a history fan, is like thinking, how insane are these people? We're horror writers.
Yes. And that's
Halloween
why
is not a holiday for us, it's a lifestyle.
it is. And the Asylum of there's a reason we do this show through the Asylum of Fear.
Yeah. Asylum is the key word here.
Yes, it is. Okay, folks. Thanks for joining in. Didn't get any comments this time, but oh well. So what? This will be available on my YouTube channel, which is called Podcast in Search of a Rabbit Hole. Um, hit like and subscribe. It doesn't cost you nothing. It takes like 15 seconds. And we're not making any money out of it. It's just that
Yeah.
the more likes and subscriptions we get, the more features that we can use to do all sorts of cool mojo. So
And I
just
mean,
please hit it,
and if new people tune in and like us, hopefully they'll go out and check out our books.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Nothing wrong with a little shameless self promotion.
Oh, hell no. I learned that a long time ago.
That's right. So, okay, 2 weeks from now, Operation Market Garden.
Bridge Too Far.
That's
Great
it.
movie. Watch it.
All right. We'll see you next time, folks.
Ciao.